enjoy a good PowerBrew. So my name is Jill Hermes. I'm the Director of Corporate Services with the Advantage C program, and I'm also here with our other moderator, Michelle Shepard, our Client Support Services Coordinator. And so today we're going to have a special guest, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about Advantage C. You're probably familiar. Whoops. There we go. You're probably familiar with the program, but let me just tell you a little bit about us. So Advantage C is a service of Carroll Community College. We do have training for people in the business community, whether it's leadership and management or new and emerging technologies, sales and service programs, some industry-specific certification training, and of course, safety and compliance training. And we also have consulting services that we offer, growth and change management, and I think we all are experiencing change on some level all the time. We can help you with policies and procedures and performance management systems. We can also assist you with facilitation, with strategic planning, focus groups, vendor evaluations. And what I would say is just, think of us as you're going through these things. One of the topics that we discussed recently was recruitment and retention. And oftentimes when we're in the midst of a talent shortage like we are now, we really need to look at these different options and say, hey, maybe this is the time where we invest in training our current staff, and that can actually help with those issues like retention. And then finally, you see the assessment piece there, where we can help you with climate assessments, employee and management effectiveness, and other things. So if you've joined us before, you're probably pretty familiar with how to navigate the presentation. And you can see here, we really like you to be interactive with us. Michelle's going to put out some polling questions as we roll through the webinar. And then also you'll be able to see our guest speaker in the window, in the webinar window as we get started. And then you can also just chime in with any questions as we roll forward as well. So we're very happy today to have Eric Williamson with us. We're proud that he's an adjunct faculty member here at Carroll Community College. He's also the author of a new book, How to Work with Jerks, and that's what he's going to speak about today. He's the president and CEO of Tailored Training and a keynote speaker who helps organizations create an atmosphere where employees are acknowledged, valued, and developed into leaders. And isn't that what we all want? Eric is also here after not getting a lot of sleep last night. He is the proud father of a new baby and a daughter as well. So he's a busy man, and he's got his own strategies to deal with these difficult situations and keep going. So we're very happy to welcome you today. I'm going to hand things over to Eric.
Okay, thank you very much, Jill. I really appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. I am excited for the opportunity to talk about something that's very near and dear to our hearts, how to work with jerks. I'm sure this is something that we can all relate to, or at least most of us, and if you haven't, don't worry, there's still time. Anyway, today I'm excited to talk about how to work with jerks. The key to making the most out of this webinar is to be engaged. So I'm looking for you to ask questions, submit comments, share your experiences with dealing with jerks, and also respond to the polls that we have sprinkled throughout this webinar. Today you're going to learn some tips and strategies about how to work with jerks, and you'll be able to take those things and immediately apply it to your everyday office as soon as you report back. We're going to begin with our first poll. We're going to kick things off with the first poll, which is, what is the #1 tool you need to succeed in the workplace? Is it experience, expertise, time management, adaptability, or social skills? Okay, this is very interesting. All right, adaptability seems to be the most overwhelming response here. Now, to be honest with you, you can make an argument for all of these tools, but today I'm going to make the argument of social skills as the number one tool you need in the workplace. And that's because, in my belief, it is the one tool that you're going to need regardless where you work. Whether you're working at one place and you decide to move to another place, regardless where you work or what role you serve, you're going to need social skills in order to manage relationships and work effectively with other people. As a matter of fact, Glassdoor, they completed a survey not too long ago about the 50 best places to work. And in that survey, among these 50 businesses, they all had one thing in common, and that was the importance of social skills. Because they practiced good social skills, they had good relationships with each other, they were able to have a good culture where people worked well together, and there was a lot of good communication going back and forth. And so employees and the leaders themselves, they all appreciated that kind of culture that was created. Also, social skills, it requires you to interact effectively and connect with others at a personal level. Because no matter how smart, talented, or gifted you are, let's face it, I mean, we will need to rely on other people to help us get our work done, no matter what we do. But my question to you is, if social skills are so important, why do why do we have difficulty getting along with certain people in the work environment? I mean, let's be honest. Do you ever have difficulty getting along with some of the people you work with? Some of you may be nodding your head emphatically or saying something like, heck yeah. And this seems to be a problem for many. And so what I'd like to do is I want to share three stories with you right now about three people in the workplace and how the absence of social skills not only impacts them, but it also impacts their work environment as well. First, we have Amy. She is to the left side with the computer monitor displayed, and she looks pretty stressed out. She got fed up with her toxic work environment, and some of the people she worked with, they were jerks, and she found them to be rude and untrustworthy. She felt like she always had to look over her back every time she was doing something because she always felt that someone was always out to get her. So she became paranoid, and she just couldn't take it anymore. So you know what she did? She abruptly quit her job, and she found another place to work. And the person in the middle, Jan, she's the one who's rolling her eyes right now. And that's because her boss constantly micromanages every single thing that she does. I mean, every time he assigns her a work assignment, he's always checking for a status every other minute, always over her shoulder, wondering where things are going. And she tries her best to avoid the situation or just put her head down and do her job. But let's face it, she's unhappy and she doesn't look forward to doing any work when she's working. And finally, we have Tom. Tom's to the right, and his hair is a little messed up, and he looks pretty irate. Now, he started off not letting himself get bothered by his coworker, who constantly ignored his advice on a project. Until one day, Tom got fed up and lashed out at his coworker for failing to listen to him. And when the project went south, instead of apologizing for not taking Tom's advice, the coworker threw Tom under the bus and blamed the project's failure on Tom. And let me tell you, that was the first time people at work saw Tom that upset in more than 20 years of service. Now, see, most of us, we can share Jan, Tom, and Amy's frustration when dealing with these types of personalities and behaviors in the workplace. And we wish we had better coping methods. And I'm sure some of you have a special word to describe some of these people that you work with. But for today's webinar, let's just call them jerks. And some examples of jerks can be people who are rude, bossy, sarcastic, people who are just plain poor communicators and poor listeners. Some people who can throw you under the bus, just like what happened in Tom's situation, also those are people who are hell-bent on creating an atmosphere full of fear and distrust. Some of us may respond the way these three people have, such as lash out or avoid the situation or just leave the company. And which is why today we're going to learn some strategies that will help you succeed no matter where you work. These strategies that we're going to talk today are going to help you cultivate deeper and more productive relationships. Now, know that these strategies, they're not a silver bullet for every situation you have. So for example, while one strategy we go over today may help you with one situation, another strategy may be more fitting for someone else. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about your own personal situation or past experiences that you've dealt with. Now, today I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you to discuss what causes us to have poor relationships with the people we work with. Why do people act the way they do? And how this jerkish behavior affects us personally and professionally, and how to deal with them. I'm also going to highlight the benefits of cultivating workplace relationships and how we can ensure greater success. Some of the strategies that you're going to learn today are how to diffuse tense situations and mitigate conflict, keeping you cool when things get hot and heavy. Also, how to build trust and gain influence with others, and how to manage and deliver crucial conversations. So this leads us to our next poll. What is a jerk? What is your opinion? Is it a micromanager, a narcissist, someone who's passive aggressive, a liar, or someone who lacks social skills? I'll give you about a minute to provide your response to that.
As you all are completing the poll, I think it's interesting because we all have the things that press our buttons, right? And if we think about past experiences, what has really kind of pushed us over the edge. And so this will be really interesting information when we think about the workplace.
Okay, very interesting. Lack social skills seems to be the overwhelming response, and I'm sure that shouldn't be a surprise since we just got finished talking about the importance of social skills in the workplace. So yes, that is correct. When we think of jerks, we think of the other characteristics, the other options here, like a micromanager or a narcissist or someone who's passive aggressive, or the people who treated Amy, Jan, and Tom earlier. But what it all comes down to, a jerk is someone who doesn't use social skills as a necessary job skill. So whether these people simply don't realize that they lack social skills or deny that it's important at all, jerks make it extremely difficult for you and them to succeed and for your organization to flourish. Jerks can create a toxic work environment. Jerks, they usually fail to manage their emotions, and also they can make impulsive decisions. And we're going to get uncover some of those characteristics and what drives them to do what they do. But at the end of the day, social skills is necessary to help us connect with coworkers because that's at the heart of what we do day in and day out. And it also provides for a successful work environment. So that brings us to, let me just skip. What brings us to how do we become work jerks? Now, I firmly believe that we should always look for the good in people, no matter what happens. So while most people, I believe, don't intend to become jerks, some of us can exhibit some jerkish behavior for a variety of reasons. Maybe, they have some stress at home or some personal issues. Now, most of us, we probably entered the work environment not even thinking about becoming jerks or even working with jerks. We simply just wanted to do a good job, right? I mean, we probably wanted to add value, contribute to the work environment, and earn people's respect. So what happened? Well, I've identified 4 key factors that cause us to become jerks, and those are lack of generational awareness, lack of training, financial uncertainty, and technology. So let's first talk about lack of generational awareness. This causes constant stress in today's work environment because today's work environment consists of multiple generations. We have the baby boomers, Generation X, the millennials, and we also have Generation Z. Those are people who were born in 1995. Now, you would think that these types of generations will generate a diverse and healthy work environment, but it also contributes to toxic work environments, especially when people don't understand each other and people fail to acknowledge the types of people that we work with. What we need to do is adjust our working style to suit the people that we're working with. We need to gain a deeper understanding of each other's personalities, behaviors, experience, and work habits. Not dealing with these situations the right way, it can cause stress, unhappiness, and employee turnover. And as you recall, Jill just got finished talking about employee engagement and how to retain talent and understanding generational awareness and the people that come to the table. That's going to help you out. We also have lack of training and preparation. This can cause ongoing anxiety. This occurs in organizations who seldom invest in soft skills or social skills training, such as conflict management, emotional intelligence, team building, diversity and inclusion, things like that. And additionally, you'll find college grads who organizations just recently hired, they may just come in without any kind of experience or expertise in adopting the necessary social skills needed to manage workplace relationships or even navigate through the political atmosphere. Now, usually this requires my help with organizations, whether it's a university or a college or even an employer, to develop programs to build relationships, morale, and strengthen communication. You also see similar lack of training and preparation when seasoned employees are transitioned into leadership positions through a promotion. Some are simply not equipped to handle these roles. And why is that? Well, a lot of times these people did a fantastic job at what they did before. They produced the best amount of widgets, the fastest among the organizations. They did a fantastic job. They were great at it. And now they were so great, it's time to move them up in the corporate world and have them lead other people. Well, the issue with that is, although they were great with numbers and doing their technical job very well, the issue is they probably didn't have the training needed to deal with people, because the higher you climb, you have to be able to manage other people and get that work done through them. So they're immediately at a disadvantage. And once again, this would usually require my help to develop some leadership programs to help some of these up and coming leaders to have all the tools that they need in order to do their new job. And then we have technology. Technology, I love technology. That's why we're doing a webinar, right? It makes things efficient. It helps achieve the work-life balance. It's awesome. However, technology can cause constant frustration. It can drastically alter human interaction. It has removed us from the face-to-face connection that we were once used to. Let's face it, before millennials entered the workforce, employees had to meet face-to-face, right? We met in board meetings. Nowadays, we have new, more efficient ways of doing business that don't require face-to-face meetings. People are allowed to telework or do a webinar like we're doing today. What used to be accomplished in a cubicle, in a meeting room, or in business attire can now be accomplished in the comfort of your own home with a pair of blue jeans and maybe even your PJs. Now, although this creates more efficient and better work-life balance, it has an impact on how we deal with conflict while working with others. It can make us less prepared to handle conflict or participate in crucial conversations. Instead of conversing face-to-face, we can do it electronically via email or instant messenger or other communication platforms. I mean, there are people who literally have cubicles sitting right next to each other and communicate via email instead of having that face-to-face conversation. We can miss out on the tone, the context, the body language during these face-to-face meetings. And these are all vital for comprehension of health of a relationship and to understand what's really going on in the conversation. Let me give you an example. Managers or supervisors, they can find it difficult and challenging when having a face-to-face performance review discussion, or maybe addressing a conduct issue or some kind of behavior issue, because they're not used to that face-to-face interaction. The same thing happens to employees. When they're having these discussions, they can find it difficult and challenging to control their emotions during these situations. Somebody can become defensive, argumentative, even belligerent. So even though technology is great for efficiency and thoroughness, it can be counterproductive if we don't have the right balance. And lastly, we have financial uncertainty. Financial uncertainty causes insecurity and frustration, especially when organizations face hardships. Jerks can appear out of nowhere. Some people can get stressed and frustrated when they lose a promotion or a raise, or their company has layoffs, and they could be afraid of whether they might be next on the chopping block. So in harsh economic setbacks, when they face harsh economic setbacks, people can get frustrated with having to start all over again. And a classic example of this occurred 10 years ago during the 2008 financial crisis. This caused major challenges to secure healthy relationships and affected all generations entering the workforce, in the workforce, or poised to leave the workforce. Whether it's a major crisis like 2008 or just a period where job availability is limited or a lack of promotion or raise, economic uncertainty causes frustration and anxiety. So now that you know what causes jerks to exist, you should understand the impact that it has on the workplace. Some of you may be familiar. It can affect your company's bottom line. It can cause decreased productivity, work absence, and lead to poor relationships, what we talked about. Now, according to CPP, which is one of the organizations that produces the Myers-Briggs assessments and things like that, very reputable company, they contend that dealing with jerks can cause nearly about 3 hours per week dealing with conflict just from jerks. Now, through my experience consulting with different organizations, I've seen this number skyrocket. I've seen us deal with conflict from jerks about 4 to 5 hours a week. And some of those examples, some of you may be asking, well, what does that really mean? I mean, what kind of conflict are you talking about? Well, sometimes we can spend time just trying to avoid the person, maybe talking to another person about how much you can't stand dealing with that other person, or just trying to figure out how to respond. And some of us may be engaged in tit-for-tat debates with the jerk that can eat up a lot of our time. So spending our time, focusing on jerks and dealing with that conflict, when we're doing that, we're not spending much time doing our work. So that creates low productivity. Now let's take a break and have another poll. What is the average rate of absenteeism in the workplace? Is it 10%, 14%, 20%, or 25%?
Well, I'm already learning quite a lot during this presentation, Eric, and I know absenteeism and certainly, decreased productivity are big problems in the workplace. But what I feel really good about is I'm in the generation that is sage and philosophical. And I'm going to wear that like a badge.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and we're definitely fortunate to be in an environment where we can work with so many different types of people.
Absolutely.
I mean, especially here at Carroll Community College. I mean, you're dealing with students, you're dealing with faculty, all represent different generations.
Right.
Which is great for diversity.
It is. That diverse perspective is really helpful, but challenging sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Especially when we don't have that awareness and don't take the time to, to really understand one another.
I'm kind of thinking about how many people I annoy when I email because I prefer to email rather than call. So I'll always email than call. So Jill, maybe you can enlighten me on that.
You share your technology wisdom with me and I'll enlighten you.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah. Embrace the technology, but just find the right balance. That's what it's all about sometimes. Okay, over half the people selected 14%. All right, we have 20% here, and then we have 25% with 11%. Well, I'm here to tell you that based on my research, what I found is that people get so stressed out when dealing with jerks that almost 1 in 4 people don't show up to work. So that's 25%. They get so stressed out when dealing with jerks that they just get fed up and they just don't want to show up. Basically, that's called a mental health day. A lot of people can probably relate to. So that's 25%. And not only, there are people who get so fed up with dealing with jerks that they leave the company. Now, that's voluntarily leave the company or involuntarily. Now, for all you business leaders out there who have tuned in, you should know that replacing an employee can cost more than 200% of that other employee who just left original salary. So that could be costly. So keeping in mind of trying to understand, relationships and manage them, that can save you a lot of money doing that rather than try to matriculate someone else into the workforce and investing all that money in training for another person, which might create another cycle of going back and forth and dealing with the same situation. Okay, we also have workplace violence. So if you deal with jerks the wrong way, things can come to a head. Dealing with jerks the wrong way can lead to workplace violence. As a matter of fact, in 2017, workplace violence accounted for nearly 18% of simple assaults and 13% of aggravated assaults. I mean, that's no way to deal with a situation. There's got to be better coping methods, which is what we're going to be discussing quite soon. And before we do that, we're going to do another poll, which shows, where do you think jerks are most prevalent? customer service positions, sales positions, manufacturing, legal positions, or just about everywhere? What do you think? Right. Yes, that's right. 90% jerks exist everywhere. Exactly. Now, a lot of times people think, well, I'll just quit and find a new job, just like Amy did in the scenario. But to come to find out, I didn't finish that story with Amy. The place that she worked actually had more jerks. So she abruptly quit to get a new job just to get away from her jerk environment. And now she's working with another jerk. And she doesn't like it at all. Also, there are people who think that, well, I'll just overpower jerks with my righteousness. I'll just say I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm going to go to HR, I'm going to go to my management staff and let them know so I can get that person to stop their jerkish behavior. Well, if you know jerks like I do, jerks don't take a day off, and sometimes they could be one step ahead of you. They could be going to HR or to management with their own version of the story. So now you have two different sides of the situation, which means it makes it harder to come to a resolution. Now, look, I by no means am I telling you to not go to HR or not go to management when you have an issue. It's probably part of your normal operating procedures. That's what you should do. That's what is encouraged. But in case you don't make any headway with that, these tools that you're going to learn in a couple of slides, that's going to help you try to get through that situation so you can focus on the work instead. So here is how you can work jerk free. Let's first talk about what not to do. Don't ignore the issue. Don't lash out. And don't engage in any violent behavior. These are not only ineffective strategies, but it helps you become a jerk yourself. And that's something that you don't want to do either. Avoiding situations where jerks are present inadvertently sends a message that jerk behavior is acceptable and does not bother you. And it's only a matter of time before you blow up at that person. And trust me, you don't want that to happen, because that's how I became a jerk in my past life. So I'm going to introduce a flexible set of skills, timeless tools that you can use in different situations. Like I began with the webinar earlier, you can use these certain strategies in different situations, and one might benefit you while another might benefit someone else. Now, these tools are the strongest drivers of leadership and personal excellence, and it's possible you may have used these tools at least once before in your life. These tools will help you diffuse tense situations, keep you cool when things get heavy, help you not take things personally, help you build trust and confidence, and help you manage and deliver crucial conversations. So the first strategy I have is called recognition. It's really recognizing your emotions and behaviors and the emotions and behaviors of other people. Now, this can be the difference between staying employed or losing your job and your sanity, because this will help you gain trust and influence with other people. This will help you handle day-to-day situations, for example, doing negotiations with stakeholders, interviewing for jobs, managing and deliver crucial conversations. This also helps leaders implement change because you're constantly aware of how other people are behaving. You're able to manage, you're able to observe other people's personalities, behaviors, and how they're feeling and how you are feeling as well. The first step to managing this behavior is actually being aware and keeping your head on a swivel about what's going on and how people are reacting to whatever's going on in the work environment. An executive in the public sector once said that recognizing your emotions is the most important leadership quality all employees must possess, because it's important to do a health check to assess your situation. This also helps you make better decisions because you can allow yourself to better understand yourself with clarity. As a leader, recognizing not only your emotions and behaviors, but the emotions and behaviors of others will help you become more strategic in determining the next course of action. So in the same vein of recognizing your emotions, I'd like to understand how you recognize your emotions. What is your physical response to conflict and stress? So when you're in the work environment or if you're at home, what happens? How do you respond physically when you're stressed out? You know, does your heart beat fast? Does your mouth get dry? Do your palms get sweaty? Do you have any kind of shortness of breath? And there's no right or wrong answer to this at all. This is pretty much just how in tune you are with how you respond to certain situations.
This is really interesting, Eric. I think in different situations over the past 25 years in the workforce, I've experienced probably all of these in different situations, right? And one of the things you just said really struck me is how we can learn to not take things personally, because I think that's so key in managing our emotions.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, a lot of times, we think, oh, this person's out to get me. This person's out to make me look like a fool at work.
Right.
And, how could this person do this to me?
Right.
But there's something could be underlying that we need to actually try to uncover. So being aware of your emotions and knowing that, listen, this person is saying something personal to me. I need to tell this person off. Knowing how our emotions are, we'll be able to take a pause and take the appropriate action.
Exactly.
Heart beats fast. Wow. That's a big one. And I'll just share a little bit with me. I think I've exhibited all four of these. I mean, when I started out having performance discussions, when I was a leader in the public sector, my mouth would get really dry. Especially if I was addressing performance issues. My heart would beat fast if I was in my younger days when I was going tit for tat with another person in the work environment, and I felt like they were baiting me to do something that I would regret, and I would go back and forth with someone about I would originally talk about one issue, and then that issue would turn into a personal issue, and then we would go back and forth, so my heart would beat really, really fast. And when I'm trying to explain certain things, whether it's with my wife or with someone at work, I would get shortness of breath because I would just be thinking so fast about my response that I just, would just lose my breath. So yes, we all respond to stress differently. In conflict, we can lash out, we can avoid, or we can get defensive with certain situations. But the key to preventing these situations from occurring, from lashing out or getting defensive, is being in tune with how your body responds. So if you notice that your heart is beating fast, that's a key trigger. That's a key identifying trigger for you to work to address that situation quickly so that you can come up with a measured response. That's a trigger to let you know that, hey, this conversation is going to turn south, and I need to be prepared to make sure that I get the optimal response, the optimal situation comes out of this. So the first step is recognizing those emotions, and you all know, as you can see, most overwhelmingly, your heart beats fast, so that's a good step. So let's talk about some tips to recognizing your emotions. You should ask for informal feedback, whether it's a colleague or a peer of yours. It's not always easy to do, and it takes courage to ask for informal feedback, but it's always a great idea to do a health check. Also, think on a regular basis. Set some time aside, meditate, do yoga. Self-introspection helps you think clearly and calmly and plan appropriately. I also encourage you to write in a journal. Write down your feelings to get clarity. Also, take a personality test. This is something when I consult with other organizations, I highly recommend doing, such as the Myers-Briggs assessment or even DISC. I see Jill, she's a big advocate of Myers-Briggs. That not only helps you understand yourself, but the people you're working with. So if someone who's overbearing or always sarcastic towards you, that helps you get a bit of a window into what they're going through and how you can tailor your personality and tailor your response to make sure that your relationship with them is in the best possible way. And you can communicate in a non-jerkish way. The next thing we have is poise. Now, leaders use poise when interacting with staff. If you're having a staff meeting or a meeting with a group of people, it's important that the leader is showing a calm head and able to keep their cool during heated discussions. And that's where poise comes into play. Failure to have poise, we can more than likely react on impulse. We not only act like jerks, we can create toxic work environments. Examples of leaders who lack poise can be people who belittle others in public, people who are unable to express the seriousness of the situation and how they feel about it. And some people, when you lack poise, you can face unnecessary grievances or lose your leadership position, officially or unofficially, because you can lose the respect from your teammates as well. So when you have poise, poise helps you keep you cool during heated discussions and it helps you not take things personally as well. And here are some tips for you to practice poise. I call it the AAA effect. It stands for assess, analyze, act. Step one, before making a decision, consider all the facts, assess the situation, and take in all possible outcomes. The next thing you want to do is analyze your decision. Weigh your decisions with care before you respond. And then finally, act. But don't respond immediately. Take a moment, clear your head, and relax. Avoid making decisions based on mood or based on feeling. Now, you can do this when you're engaged in conflict, whether you're addressing a performance issue, whether you're conveying bad news or something that your staff doesn't really appreciate, that you expect that they won't really like. Using that method, the AAA effect, is a three-step process that really allows you to address the situation step by step without going to step three, which is act, which is basically reacting on impulse, which is what a lot of us do. And finally, we have perspective. Perspective is very important. It's probably my favorite trait here because it requires you to understand someone else's point of view. And that's very difficult to do, especially when you really don't feel like seeing someone else's perspective. But it helps you diffuse tense situations and mitigate conflict. As a matter of fact, Stephen Covey, the author of the Seven Habits of Highly Successful People, he said it best when he said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And as Dale Carnegie once said, other people may often be wrong, but we cannot condemn them just yet. We need to seek to understand them. Success in dealing with people requires an intentional grasp of the other person's point of view. So here are some tips that you can do to apply perspective. First, you can seek to understand and reflect on the view of other people. That means putting yourself in someone else's shoes. How are they feeling? How would you respond if that person was going through the same situation? The next thing is called active listening. That is a key component of perspective because you have to really listen to that person's point of view and hear their entire message. Actively listening by asking questions, confirming your understanding, and clarifying anything that doesn't make sense. That means giving that person your full attention. So put down your phone, put down your email, and reassure that person that what they have to say is important. And then finally, we have empower. Don't micromanage. So in the same situation as Jan, one of the scenarios I gave earlier, that manager probably should have gave that person, Jan, a little bit more latitude. Latitude is gratitude. Empowering them to get the work done instead of overseeing every single detail of the assignment. That builds trust, and that goes a long way. Because as leaders, when we assign someone to work, we need to make sure that they understand that we trust them to get the work done. Some situations where you probably wouldn't want to do that much empowerment is when you have a new employee, because you want to make sure that they understand how to get the work done. But for the most part, you want to make sure that you give people latitude. And we also have providing small wins, and that helps people gain confidence, especially if you are new in the workplace and you're looking to get into a groove. Giving them work that they're able to do and that they can do independently, that'll give them the confidence that they need in order to do progressively more challenging assignments. So I also have some bonus tips for you as we're winding down here to creating productive relationships. Disarming a jerk and promoting a jerk-free environment, it begins with creating productive relationships. And here are some of the tips that you can do to create productive relationships. I'm going to first talk about one of the books that I highly recommend you read. It's called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. And in this book, he talks about providing a safe environment for employees and management alike. And this safe environment allows people to talk about issues, expectations, express concerns without feeling judged, criticized, things like that. And nothing's more evident than in this book, he talks about this big experiment called the spaghetti marshmallow experiment, where several hundred people were participating in who can build the biggest tower using only spaghetti and marshmallows. And in this experiment, you had a group of kindergartners who were participating, you had lawyers, you had accountants, you had all types of professional people. And guess who won that contest? It was the kindergartners. You know why? Because all they were concerned with was just building the tower and just having fun and just doing it. Meanwhile, the lawyers and all the other professionals, they were kind of concerned whether or not they actually knew what they were talking about. They second guessed themselves. They needed to know how they fit in. Now, tying this back into a safe environment, if you have a safe environment, you can have ideas. It allows for people to have ideas, and people can feel confident and comforted knowing that they can produce ideas, express concerns, and discuss expectations without feeling like they're doing something wrong. So one way you can practice a safe environment is holding one-on-ones. Now, managers can hold one-on-ones with their staff. Managers can hold one-on-ones with their own manager, with their own colleagues, and staff can hold one-on-ones with their own colleagues as well. But this allows people to have a safe environment to discuss expectations, issues, the status on certain projects, things of that nature. And this also prevents miscommunication and any unnecessary conflict. Also, I would say be emotionally curious, especially for leaders. And what I mean by emotionally curious is asking open-ended questions with your staff. You know, what was the best part of your day? Or what are you frustrated with right now? What are you most passionate about right now with working on this specific project? This really sends a signal to your staff and to other people that what they're working on is important, and that they can come to you and they can talk about what's really on their mind. And that creates a safe environment. So that's one thing you really want to focus on. Another thing is communicate early and often. And you can do that through these one-on-one discussions, through team meetings, things like that. And also to reassure your understanding of certain situations. So make sure you do communicate clearly and often. Now, these tips, they apply to all professionals and students alike. For example, I did a talk in DC at this company called Spitfire Strategies. They really enjoyed this conversation because they had some issues that they were dealing with, and I helped them build their relationships. Same thing can be said for students as well. Students who are poised to graduate in the workforce, like I mentioned earlier, they need to be prepared to know what it's like to go in the workforce. They may know how to have the best resume and interview very well, but one of the things that they need to know more of is how to build relationships with certain people in the workforce. And sometimes you just learn by doing. And sometimes that's how jerks can exist, and that's how turnover can exist because they're simply not prepared. So I've had the pleasure to working with McDaniel College and other colleges around here to talk about some of the things that we're talking about right now to help better prepare them. And I think we have one last poll. Oops. One last poll here. What do employees value the most in a job? Is it work-life balance, good pay and benefits, relationships, or meaningful work? Work-life balance. Oh, okay. That seems to be the winner. Meaningful work, yes. Relationships and good pay and benefits. And right now, I'm going to make the argument for relationships. And the reason for that, I'm going to refer to that same survey that was completed just recently by Glassdoor. And in that survey about the 50 best jobs to work for, a lot of the employees there said that, you know what? I don't really care, well, not care, but this isn't really the kind of job that I saw myself working. But because I work well with my colleagues, I have a great relationship with my boss, I have a great relationship with the people I work with, I don't mind staying here. I like staying here. As a matter of fact, as you probably know that the saying, people don't leave companies, they leave their bosses. And I think in April or March, there was a similar discussion here at the PowerBrew that talked about employee retention. And at the end of the day, it's about those relationships, establishing those relationships with people, because we don't always get to choose the people we work with, but we do get to choose how we handle the relationships with the people we work with. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about some of these benefits to some of these tips that I talked about. Because these benefits to these traits, poise, recognition, and perspective, it helps you become more marketable. So if, let's say, for example, you're doing a great job at where you work, you like the relationships, but you're looking for another challenge, and you're going to another job. Well, having these flexible set of skills, you can transfer to another place because you'll learn how to interact with those other people more effectively, and you'll be able to share that experience that you had at that other job. It also helps advance your career. As I mentioned earlier, people who are promoted to a leadership position, they're now dealing with people. They're no longer doing the work. So you have to manage and get people to do that same kind of work and produce that same kind of result. So having those kind of social skills, being able to interact with those people, jerks alike, that's going to help you advance your career. And also helps you alleviate stress. I mean, how many times have you left work, left home, went home stressed, just having an awful day dealing with certain people at work? This is going to help alleviate that because you'll learn how to be able to interact more effectively with those people. You have the skills that you need. You'll be armed to have those discussions. And finally, I want to just leave you with some parting words here. Like I said before, I believe that people are intentionally good. So we should always, before rushing to judgment, see the good in people. And it's not about the work. It's about the people. Because success is based on the relationships that we build, not always about the work we produce. And like I mentioned before, it's not always about, we don't always get to choose the people we work with, but we do get to choose how we handle the relationships that we work with. Cultivating relationships in the workplace equals personal and professional success, happiness, and allows you to be stress-free. And it's not just a nice thing to have. Interacting with people effectively in the workplace, working with jerks, learning how to do that, it's not just a nice thing to have. It's actually mandatory. In a lot of organizations, you will find that we get evaluated based on how well we work with others. So make sure you keep that in mind when you're doing that. Because now, especially in this kind of environment, relationships matter now more than ever. So if you want to get things done effectively at your job, you want to be that clear-cut choice for that promotion, if you want to just do your job well and not be stressed out, learn how to work with jerks and take these tools that we just learned. Now, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to entertain them. I know Michelle's probably going to solicit any questions for right now.
Eric, that is great information. I don't know of anybody out there who hasn't had to, challenging work relationships. And so these are great tips. I feel that, can help everyone out there. We do have a couple questions. The first question is, can you share a personal experience? I know you mentioned before that you were a jerk in your previous life. Can you share a personal experience when you changed from jerk to non-jerk response at work?
Oh, yeah, I most certainly can. I would say the first experience, I'll talk about when I first entered the workforce. So let me just, I'm going to address this question, but let me just give you a bit of a backstory. So when I graduated from Connecticut College, in 2002, I felt I was ready to enter the workforce. I did great in school. I made the dean's list. I was a clear-cut choice for this first job, and I was excited about doing it. I interviewed well and everything. And when I entered the workforce, I was dealing with people who all of them were older than me. All right, they were all seasoned. They knew their job, effectively. And I had a mentor who was supposed to show me the ropes. And for some reason, I took that, that success in school and tried to translate it into the professional world, and thinking that I can, just learn how to do this job. And I didn't think I had the answer to anyone. All right. And so my mentor, she would give me orders. She'd say, don't do it this way, do it this way. I would always feel that she was out to get me and make me feel like I didn't know what I was dealing with. And I wasn't equipped to handle that in the professional work environment. So you know what I did? I let this really eat up at me. And I at first ignored it, just said, you know what, I'm only here, it's only been, several weeks. I'll let her, feel like she's important. And then one day I just lashed out at her. I said, look, I know what I'm doing. And I don't need you to tell me how to do this job. I can do just fine. I did well in school. So don't worry about it. And when that happened, our relationship, me and my mentor's relationship, it was terrible. I was alone because she was still friends and she was still good colleagues with all the other coworkers. So when I entered work every day, I was by myself. I didn't have anyone to rely on. My social skills were terrible. And in this job, I had to deal with clients as well. And I helped them get certain benefits so that they can be eligible for certain government programs. And sometimes people weren't eligible just because they weren't qualified for it. They didn't meet the qualifications. And what happened was some people took it out on me because when I told them that they weren't eligible, they would take it out on me and say, well, look, why aren't I? You're not doing your job. And what happened? I took it personally. And what happened was I got defensive and I yelled right back at them, at my own clients, the people that I served. So one or two things was destined to happen pretty soon. Either I was going to quit because I just couldn't take all this, or I was going to get fired. And so luckily, my boss, he caught on to all this, and he advised me to take some social skills training. I took an emotional intelligence course, and it really helped me understand how much of a jerk I was acting, because I thought I knew it all and I didn't. Hubris is something else. And, that was one thing. That was one situation when I first entered the workforce. I just wasn't prepared to deal with people socially. The next reason how I became a jerk was when I had a leadership position. I wasn't prepared to deal with people. I processed, the best amount of cases, the fastest amount of cases. I was the best person in the office with that. And it was time for me to get promoted. I was doing that job in and out. I was ready for a challenge. And I had to deal with the people that I worked alongside with. And some of those people were jealous. They made my job completely, really hard. And I didn't realize why they did that until I recognized that some people thought that they should have been hired for that position. They should have been promoted. And I didn't understand that. And so I engaged in tit for tat debates with them as well. And I was about to lose my promotion. But then, thankfully, one of the things that I did was I had a mentor who, kind of helped me take a look back at how I started my career and what happened before and how to interact with people. And one of the things I did was I didn't just change my behavior overnight. I recognized that what was needed in that environment was more emotional intelligence skills. It was more training to help people understand who we are and what we bring to the table. So those are two experiences. I promise I won't be a jerk again, at least I hope not. But yeah, those are two experiences where I became a jerk and took some training and had some people tell me, how it is that I was behaving to help me turn a corner.
Wow, great examples. Thanks so much for sharing that. That was very honest. So we have two similar questions. I'm going to ask them both because I think they both relate. The first is, how long do you stay in a job that you've exhausted all of these tips and the jerk is still there? And then what is the catalyst when one should move or resign when dealing with jerks?
That's a very good question. I'm so glad that question was brought up. And the easy response is, well, it depends. Depends on the situation, right? And that's not that can be the situation. But some of the things you need to do is see what you've done so far. How have you addressed the situation? Have you gone to management? Have you gone to HR? Have you looked at some of the traits that we talked about today? Has your office promoted any kind of personality assessments? Have you done any team building so that you can better understand the people that you're working with? What do you think the reason is why this person is acting the way they do? Have you had any civil conversations with this person? Has it affected your health and your well-being? Meaning, when you enter work, are you just exhausting all your leave because you don't want to work in this situation? Is it affecting your performance? Those are certain questions that you need to ask yourself to make sure that you're not just abruptly quitting, or that you haven't you've made the right decision. So if you've asked yourself those questions and you're constantly unhappy, and your health is being impacted, your well-being is being impacted, your family is being impacted, those are things you really need to take a hard look at, and not just quit or not just leave that company, but the next question that you have to think about is, where are you going to go next? And what's going to happen if you encounter a similar situation? Are you going to leave that job too? So you really want to think long and hard about what you need to do. So, I would ask myself those questions first, though. What have you done to address the situation? What training has been available? Who have you talked to about this? Who has addressed the situation? Is it something that has to go through a formal mediation? Those are things that you should ask yourself first. But anytime when there's a lot of let's say violent behavior going on, anytime there's a situation where people are engaging in violent behavior or kind of harassment, things like that, and there's nothing happening, it's not being addressed, it's just being swept under the rug. Usually, through my experience with working with different organizations, those are usually what I find as the catalyst. If someone just makes you completely uncomfortable, is harassing you and making you feel completely uncomfortable and almost engaging in some either verbal violence or just or physical violence with you, and it's not being addressed at all. Those can usually be the catalyst. What I've seen through my experience that have made people say, you know what, this isn't worth my time to go through this, especially if my company doesn't have my back in that situation.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think sometimes, when you're starting to bring things home and it's affecting your home, sometimes I think it's just time to hang it up at that point. I mean, in my opinion, it's to each, it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too. At the end of the day, I mean, it goes to your happiness, right? Are you happy? In my book, I talk about me being completely unhappy when I joined a company, with two others, and it was just affecting my health and my well-being and being at home as well. And I had to think long and hard about my exit strategy. And so, happiness overall, I mean, that should not be traded in for anything. You should never give your happiness, but at the same time, no matter how frustrated or willing that you're excited about leaving that job, come up with a plan to leave that company. Come up with your exit strategy, because like we've seen with Amy's situation in the beginning, she abruptly quit and now she's working with another jerk. So you want to think things through. There's nothing wrong with leaving your organization, but make sure you think things completely through.
I completely agree. I think that's it for the questions and answers. I had to mention the spaghetti and the marshmallow with the kindergartners. And it's so funny because, sometimes we get into our own heads and we just overthink it when we should just go back to just simple.
Right. Simplicity, that's the key. Yeah. A safe environment.
Exactly. Okay, well, thank you, Eric, so much. If anybody, has questions, feel free to email us. We'll get Eric to go ahead and answer those after the webinar. We do have emotional intelligence training here at the college that could definitely benefit the working with jerks. Our next PowerBrew will be on June 19th. Chet Andes, he is one of our coordinators here at the college. He's going to be talking about drones and taking your business to new heights. So we'll have that up on our website, hopefully the end of today, where you can register. And thank you all for attending. We hope you guys get back to your business day and you're able to work better with some of those jerks. Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you.